bring in our guest. Elizabeth Booker, you know her as Booker Squared on these social media streets, but she's also a really great expert. So Elizabeth, thank you for jumping in, and just correct me if I got anything wrong in my description of Medicaid and Obamacare.
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head. First of all, let's talk about just the misnomer of Obamacare that they have used over and over again to describe the Affordable Care Act, which the Republicans were very sneaky with back when this was first being put out. So that you hear folks constantly saying, oh, I'm for the ACA, but I'm against Obamacare, right? And the way that the marketplace is intertwined with what's going on with Medicaid. So it's so hard sometimes to really parse through the disinformation and misinformation that we're seeing so that people understand exactly how their healthcare is affected.
Talk to me about the passage of this bill, how this is going to go, because we do have a Voterama right now. If you could just explain that a little bit. What are we seeing happening right now in the United States Senate?
So right now I'm actually in the Capitol over here in the Senate, and we are seeing them go through Voterama. Senator Angela Alsobrooks was actually just in the room a moment ago. And so what we're seeing is the Democrats are trying to delay a vote on this bill. And that's what Voterama is, where they just keep bringing amendment after amendment after amendment to the floor so that it just delays this vote and allows us to continue to put pressure on the Republicans, which it's after hours now. So of course I've been telling folks, you don't want to put pressure via the phone lines. I know we usually say to call the Capitol switchboard, but it's after hours. So we're saying to put pressure on social media. And so this is estimated to go until about 1 a.m. sometime in that range. And that's when they will actually do a final vote. And we will find out if they're going to kill the bill or if they're going to pass it.
So, this is where I think it's really important, because people get, one of the things I think that we cannot do is give people false hope and say, oh, we can kill this bill. Let us be clear. We likely cannot kill this bill. I just want you all to be very clear about that. But if you go back to the history of Obamacare, of the Affordable Care Act, the bill that passed the House was a lot more liberal. It had a lot more provisions that look like pure universal health care. Lots more act. They had a public option. It was supposed to have a public option where you could buy through a public option, not a private healthcare company. When it went to the United States Senate, that bill moved to the right, because what's happening now, this exact same process, Republicans were throwing on amendments, raising objections to parts of the bill, trying to claw back pieces of the bill, and use this Voterama process, this process of actually arguing the bill on the floor, to pull the bill to the right, so that the final bill that went back to the House, that Nancy Pelosi had to whip votes for, was to the right of the bill that her caucus passed in the first place. And the sort of genius of what she had to do is that lady had to make those Democrats pass that bill, because when they saw that bill, they were like, we don't like it no more. And she made them pass it because they understood that they had this one little window, because they had 60 votes in the Senate, even though there were some turncoat Democrats and independents on the other side who refused to go along with some of the more liberal provisions of the bill. They had to appease those people, right? Including Joe Lieberman, whose wife was in the healthcare industry, who didn't want a public option. They had to take the public option out to appease Lieberman. This is when Democrats had 60 votes. So they sent back a bill to the House, and they had to pass that. Talk to me about some of the drama we've seen, Elizabeth, where you've seen horse trading. For a minute, it looked like Lisa Murkowski was going to get bought off by letting her constituents in Alaska still get full Medicaid. That did not work, but she was going to vote for the bill based on that. Are we seeing any of those kind of machinations happening still?
Not in this moment. It seems that in the last several hours, from what I understand, we're not seeing any of that going on. What we're seeing is a lot of scrambling. There's a lot of scrambling going on right now. And I think it's interesting you talk about how they argued the bill, the ACA back in the day, to push it further to the right. I feel like that's what Democrats are doing here, is to also try to push this further to the left, because as you said, we don't want to give people false hope and say that this won't pass, that it won't go back to the House. But it doesn't mean that it's in its final form. It doesn't mean that we can't create change. It doesn't mean that we can't force the changes that we need to see to make sure that we protect Americans and their healthcare access. I do think that Republicans are waking up to the fact that, one, their constituents are not stupid. We kept seeing over and over again this very similar rhetoric where they would say, oh, we're not actually cutting Medicaid. The benefits won't change. And I called a few Republican offices weeks ago, and I put a recording up of calling Senator Marsha Blackburn because I wanted to hear what they said. And they said, well, the benefits don't change. And a lot of constituents said, oh, okay. And they were okay with that. But I pushed back and I said, I'm not talking about the benefits that are covered. I'm talking about the funding. Can you confirm that the funding won't change? And that's when I got the pause. And they finally admitted that they were making, millions, billions of dollars in cuts to Medicaid. And then we found out later that it also affects Medicare because of something known as a pay-go rule. So I think what we're seeing is a little less of that, especially because the parliamentarian kind of came in at Lisa Murkowski's little dealings and said, this is not going to work. So it seems that that's kind of dead in the water as of right now, and they're not playing those games in the moment, but the night is still going on. So we'll see.
And they don't have 60 votes. I mean, this is something to really remember. If you go back and look at history, every single benefit that you have that is what can be considered a liberal sort of generous benefit in this society, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, Obamacare, food stamps, you name it, all of them passed when Democrats had 60 votes in the United States Senate. Just go back all the way to FDR. The same thing happened with Obamacare. If you guys you guys may not remember this history, but Democrats did not have 60 votes until Al Franken won a lawsuit to win his seat in the United States Senate. The minute he got that seat, they started cooking on Obamacare to try to get it through. Harry Reid in the Senate, Nancy Pelosi in the House, they started working to drag this bill over the finish line because, again, they had turncoats in their midst, the Joe Manchin types, the Joe Lieberman types. And so this bill does not have a 60 vote majority. Republicans don't have 60 votes. How is it that they would be able to pass it, Elizabeth? Because have they changed the rules? Tell us about this rule that's letting them pass it without 60 votes.
So this is what's known as the reconciliation process. And when you go through the reconciliation process, it only requires a simple majority of 51. You don't need those 60 votes. It also means that the Dems cannot filibuster this because, again, it does not need 60 votes. I had a lot of people in my comment section say, can't they filibuster? Unfortunately, they cannot. The Voterama is the closest that we can get to it, and they're doing it right now. And this process was created in order to make sure that the government could get certain funding passed without the extraneous extras of different things that were not considered to fall under the category. That's what happened to Lisa Murkowski. They found out that what they were trying to put in the bill fell outside of the confines of what would be considered reconciliation. And so that's why the parliamentarian said we would strike that, and it would require 60 votes to keep that provision in there. So that's where the 60 votes would come in. A lot of people were asking me, wait, I heard because of what happened with Murkowski, now 60 votes are required for the entire bill. That was not true. It would have just been required for that provision. But for the reconciliation bill as a whole, only a simple majority of 51 is needed. At the time that this was thought up, the idea was that, this will keep government from being bogged down and that we can make sure that things are funded in a proper manner, right? And that we can get this funding through while Congress can argue about the other extraneous things later on. But we're now seeing that the Republicans are using this process that was supposed to really, really benefit Americans and protect the benefits that we need. They're using it as a sword to just slash everything that Americans need, whether it be healthcare, SNAP, what have you.
Republicans have 53 votes in the United States Senate. They have 53 votes. If they lose 4 votes, then they can't pass the bill because they need a simple majority, as Elizabeth just explained. So Tillis is a no. Do we know of any other hard no's?
My understanding is that it seems that Paul is still leaning
Rand
in the
Paul.
no. Rand Paul, it was still leaning in no. I've also been told that Senator Susan Collins might be wiggling toward no. She might be feeling the pressure. There's a few other senators that people have pointed out who are not for sure no's, but could be persuaded. Senator Rick Scott was one that came up. I don't know, but that's the name.
I doubt that.
I doubt it too, but that's the name that people keep floating around. So I was like, I will mention it, but I'm not sure about that. Obviously, Senator Lisa Murkowski, because now she's been burned. She didn't get what she wanted for her state.
Right.
So people are saying that she could be persuaded. We're also seeing that they're talking about Senator Ron Johnson potentially. So, that's just a few names that have been tossed out there. But as of right now, it seems that Tillis and Paul are the only 2 for sure no's that we're hearing.
So that would make it pass. And so the goal right now, Elizabeth, as you understand it, is to amend the bill so that it's less harmful, and to try to get some of these key amendments that Democrats are posting or proposing passed so that it will reduce the harm. Am I getting that right?
Yes, and also we need to just remember this is a time for everybody to kind of stretch their legs and understand how to put pressure on our members of Congress, because we need to focus on longevity with this. We're not at the end, because it would be amazing if we could pressure them enough to get 2 more Republican senators to vote no and kill the bill. Fantastic. But as you said, we don't know that that's likely. So if they do go ahead and pass it with these changes, it will go back to the House. And all of this practice that we've gotten of coming after these senators for the last few days, we need to make sure to keep that strength up and go after the House members the same way and put this pressure on until we see, get to something that is actually workable for Americans. We can't give up. That's why I don't like giving people false hope. I don't like to say, oh, if you just do this, everything will be okay. That is not true. And we're going to keep seeing this. We're going to keep seeing these games. I mean, the fiscal year for the federal government goes from October 1st to September 30th every single year. September 30th, it's going to roll around. We are going to keep seeing this over and over again. And we need to make sure that we're consistent, that we understand how things work, that we make sure that they know that we understand how things work, and that the American people are not going to stand for it, because ultimately that's going to be what gets us through the next few years.
And by the way, but a lot of folks have been calling this a slow motion, low key repeal of Obamacare, because Republicans, if you'll recall, good friends out there, took about 60 votes when they had control of the United States Senate and House to try to repeal Obamacare. They kept saying they're going to repeal and replace it. They never had anything to replace with. They just wanted to get rid of it. And they never were able to do that. And then the Supreme Court, and I believe again this past week, reaffirmed the legality of Obamacare, that it is constitutional. So they haven't been able to get rid of it. This seems like, to me, Elizabeth, a way to just chip away at Obamacare. To say, okay, you have your Connect, you have your 10 Care, you have your Star Plus or your Badger Care. We're just going to make it really hard for you to use it. Apple Care. We're just going to make it so that your state maybe can't afford it. Yeah. And then that way we get rid of it. Is that fair?
That is extremely fair to say. And we're seeing, it's so funny because we're seeing so many parallels with the attacks on the ACA. Yesterday, I was on the Capitol steps with Senator Jackie Rosen, Senator Amy Klobuchar, and they had the little lobbyists there, which are families and children who the children have complex medical issues and disabilities. This is the same group of disabled children and their families who were here to protest against the Republicans dismantling the ACA. I mean, it truly is just the same thing over and over again. And so they're obviously trying to go after ACA/Obamacare. I try to put those names together all the time to drill it into people's minds that the ACA is Obamacare, that this is very much a slow creep into making sure that we take away not only Medicaid, but these private health insurance plans that people can access on the marketplace that they pay their own money for, and make it impossible for them to really use it, because again, the majority of hospitals rely heavily on Medicaid funding, lots of clinics, lots of medical providers. If they lose funding, they're going to have to close hospitals. They're going to have to close clinics, and it won't matter whether you have an employer sponsored plan or a plan on the marketplace. You can't get care where there's no care to be had.
Elizabeth Booker, where can people find you in these social media streets if they want to follow the things that you do?
Yes, they can find me at Booker Squared is my handle on all social media. I've had people ask about that. My maiden name was Elizabeth Booker. I'm just putting it out there. That's where the name came from, but I'm married now, so the second Booker was dropped. But you can find me at Booker Squared.
Your name was Elizabeth Booker?
It was. That was my legal name. Middle name, last name, Booker.
I respect that, because my mother's name was Philomena Lomena. She managed to find a man with the last name Lomena when there was a Lomena in her name. So Philomena Lomena, Booker, it's a thing that some of us do.
It is.
I love it. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. We appreciate you. Thank you very much. Thank y'all for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe. Share this channel. Make sure that everybody subscribes to the YouTube channel. 70% of people are lurking, watching these shows and not subscribing. Why would you do that? So make sure that you like, subscribe, and throw some comments in. Thank you all for joining the Joy Reid Show. See you on the next one, and goodbye for now.